And yes, there we go.
There we go.
So this is what I was doing this morning. I'm fiddling around with the thumbnails, trying to get the gesture of the character correct. And it's, wow, it's going very quickly. I'm going to talk quite quick. So I selected a thumbnail, and basically I'm just going into the sketch stage and trying to work out exactly what the disposition of the character's arms and legs are going to be, and whether it would work in 3 dimensions, and what the composition should be, and all of that kind of thing. This took about 3 hours to do this morning, a little bit after lunch.
And it's amazing. When you see the end result, 3 hours just sounds utterly ridiculous as to what you created.
Well, obviously, I was aware I was being recorded, so I didn't stop for many breaks or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm just sort of figuring out what the ideas should be. I'm trying to put the handle on the shield and get some kind of emotion and motion in there.
So how did you pick the initial pose?
It's one of the poses I like that I use occasionally. You end up with a back catalogue of these in your brain.
That makes sense.
And he's an aggressive character, so I wanted something that looked like he was a little bit shifty, and it's not heroic. It was supposed to be a bit sinister.
Yeah. I like that the appropriate amount of purple is going on there.
Yeah.
Because this guy, Vedian, people have guessed it's Vedian. Yeah. He's pretty purple.
I do actually tone the purple back a little.
It's funny,
bit,
I was talking to Mod Ronan, I told him Dave's going to be painting Vetian on stream later, and he said, I like that you picked Vetian because he is possibly the most ugly box you can ever make.
We like ugly.
We like ugly. It's creative license, I think, to do the other thing.
Well, I'm going in here and I'm kind of adding a little bit of bronze and copper and that kind of thing, just to offset it a little bit. Yeah, I was obviously quite well aware that he had a single colour scheme and and a very bright blue sword as well, so I thought I'd tone that back down a little bit. I have to make some concessions towards realism a little bit. You know? But it is fun with these old school cards, actually, because I don't have a lot of background knowledge of exactly what the characters look like in game or what they originally did, that kind of thing. I've only got the internet and people who know more than me in the team to ask. So yeah, I've a certain degree of creative license, but I try and stay within the bounds of what the players would expect, and just try to make them look as badass as possible, really.
Which I think it's doing a pretty good job with. I mean, if you look at the source references on the left, it is a skeleton in a purple skirt.
And one thing I didn't work out until later is actually a rather big skeleton in a purple skirt.
He is quite a big skeleton in a purple skirt, yes, he is.
So, yeah, it's not the kind of thing we can reflect adequately in the cards, of course, because they've got certain limitations according to their size, but I do what I can.
In which case you burn away and you're about 18 feet.
We might do that with this one. It's rather down to Pete and whether he can get away with it. So yeah, I'm just going in and I'm sort of adding detail and painting up what the 3-dimensional form. So the first stages of these kind of things is to do with composition, which is 2-dimensional shapes and whether they read nicely and whether they're pretty or not. And later in the painting process, you go into whether these things would work in 3D and what the light looks like falling on them, and rendering, basically, which is kind of the boring bit. All of the interesting ideas have been had, and you're just settling in to look at the 3-dimensional shape of things and work out where the light goes.
Personally, I think that's one of the interesting parts, though, because what essentially happens is, you know, like a player like myself may just look at this and never ever put any thought into those processes. So actually, what makes the end result, I think, is fascinating, because you normally get no sort of exposure to this.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of videos of this kind of thing online. Loads of other games do it, and loads of concept artists have their own video channels and that kind of thing. So, you know, that kind of content is out there, but you have to have a specific interest to go find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm switching back and forth there just to see whether my original ideas kind of worked.
So you do sort of the level of high detail in a different layer, so you can sort between the two?
Yeah, pretty much. The more layers you have in Photoshop, the more confused you get. So I tend to crunch them down quite frequently, but I usually keep a few of my original ones there just to harken back and try and see if I've lost my way, basically.
So you just got flipped?
Yeah, because I'm actually doing it right now. I tilt my head when I draw. So, and my glasses also have a slight distortion to them, which means a lot of the characters I draw end up leaning slightly one way or the other. Everyone has a slight cognitive bias when it comes to the visual acuity, so they'll tend to not quite know where vertical is most of the time, and I make it worse. So I need to keep flipping the character back and forth to make sure that it's not
make sure he's not toppling over.
Yeah, a nice dynamic pose like this also helps because all of his limbs are sticking out everywhere. Yeah. So you can get away with it a bit more, but I need to keep checking because my brain is weird, as everyone else's is too.
Yeah, of course.
But, you know, I'm also making him bigger as I go through the process. shapes are easier to work with when the character is very small, a couple of inches high, but as you get into more detail, you need to start zooming in. The eventual resolution of these things is about 4096 for some of our cards, so yeah. We also use these in marketing material and that kind of thing as well.
I mean, I post a lot out from the Twitter and stuff.
Yeah. So we like to keep a decent sort of, you can use it as a screen backdrop, basically. Yeah. So yeah, I'm basically just going in and adding some extra light sources now. Characters tend to look better if they have one main big spotlight on them and a rim light hitting them from the side. It tends to allow you to display forms a bit better, and it makes the character seem more 3D.
But I mean, the ability to visualize that while you're drawing
comes with time.
I sort of sit down to draw something and I'm happy if it vaguely resembles anything like it was intended to be. I'm not thinking about
so am I.
No, you're sitting there going, the rim light could hit it from the side a bit more. It's just the level that is associated with it is astronomical.
Well, yeah, it's one of these 10,000 hours things, right? Your brain just gets better at doing it as time goes on. You just got to grind it. So yeah, all of the principles behind these things, you just have to get good at shortcutting them and layering them on top of each other enough that you end up with an end result that works, and not getting lost along the way. So you notice I'm not zooming in very much in this screen. That's because I separated this another version of the Photoshop document out, and it's static. What I'm actually doing is zooming in and out, zooming in and out in a nauseating fashion. It's one of these things. I might do a separate video to show exactly what it looks like, but it looks like some kind of rock video or something where crash zooms are happening all the time. And you can, unfortunately, in Photoshop, get completely zoned into one tiny detail of the image and never realize that you've spent 6 hours doing a nostril hair and not done the rest of it. So you need to be careful.
It's amazing though. Again, it's another thing that I imagine comes with time, being able to work in that varying scale where you're zooming in and out and keep an image of the greater piece in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, Photoshop helps you with that as well. You can separate off extra document variants of it, and you have a lot of freedom, but there are pitfalls that come with all of the tools, and you've got to be careful. One of the things I did just there was add in overlays and color dodge layers, which you have to be very careful with because they can alter the dynamics of the entire image.
So dodging isn't a word that I normally associate with colors.
It just means that there's an additive layer that's gone on top of the image, and it's basically increased the saturation and sort of depth of each pixel. But it does it in a very... there we are.
Perfect. There we go.
There we are.
So yeah, there we go. That is the end result. So that took you 3 hours from concepting and deciding the initial pose.
Well, obviously,
to ending up with something like this.
Paused the video to go watch YouTube or something. You've got to have a break. But yeah, that's roughly the kind of time it would take me. I mean, this is basically a piece of concept art. So that's the kind of time you'd get for any of the concept guys in RuneScape would be doing that kind of thing.
That is phenomenal because it's just, to me, utterly depressing that I could spend 3 months and end up with something significantly worse than this.
Well, again, just do it a million times until you can't stand it anymore, and then you're ready for the big leagues.
Perfect. But no, it's absolutely amazing to get an insight into stuff like this, and I'm judging from the chat that this is something that, if you guys would like to see more of this, it's definitely something that we can arrange.
Yep.
Because I think it's an absolutely fascinating insight into Chronicle. Because one of the things that we get comments on so much is the card art. I mean, it is absolutely astronomically.
And I do love those comments. Yes, keep them coming. Keeps me going.
Yeah. So when you all say the card art is amazing, this is the guy who sits behind me and grins. But yeah, I'm sure that this is something that we should absolutely do in the future because I just think it's amazing to get such an insight. So thank you for showing us this.
You're very welcome.